Joining us now is Rashad Robinson. Rashad is the executive director of Color of Change, which is the nation's largest online civil rights organization with more than 1 million members. And they have a new campaign going on now that I think you will find of interest. Rashad, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, you have a new petition up on your website that the headline is "Tell the CBC Corporations Don't Speak for Black People." The CBC is the Congressional Black Caucus. What is the issue?
The issue is the Congressional Black Caucus PAC, which has an affiliation to the Congressional Black Caucus. It was founded in 1994, whereas the Congressional Black Caucus was actually founded in 1971. But the Congressional Black Caucus PAC, like many political action committees, endorses candidates. And on its face, it would seem that it's an arm of this, legacy civil rights institution. But actually, their board of 21 folks is actually dominated by corporate lobbyists. Some of the corporate donors to the PAC are folks that come from the tobacco industry, private prisons, the sort of predatory student loan companies that have been in the news, a wide range of organizations that have actually put Black people in harm's way. And so 2 weeks ago, the Congressional Black Caucus PAC made two very important announcements. One announcement was to endorse Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton in the presidential race. The other announcement was to not endorse Congresswoman Donna Edwards in her race to be only the second Black woman in the United States Senate. Both of these announcements, one was very public, one was sort of in private, but both of these announcements failed to actually show and highlight that the people making the decisions were not members of Congress and Black members of Congress that people have elected, but they were actually corporate lobbyists. And in the Congresswoman Donna Edwards case, one of the members of the board is former Congressman Al Wynn, the congressperson she defeated, the congressperson that was rejected by members of that district in Maryland who felt that he was too tied to corporations. And so this is really a question of who gets to speak for Black folks, whose voices get to determine the seal of approval on these issues. And we're really demanding that the Congressional Black Caucus do some work to reshape their board and to stop taking money from institutions that put our communities in harm's way.
You know, there's so many issues that arise out of this, Rashad. And one of them, first of all, I always explain whenever he comes up, I do work for Bernie Sanders, so I always encourage listeners to know that for disclosure reasons. I have no connection with Donna Edwards, except that I think she's fantastic and that she would be a great as well as a historic addition to the United States Senate. That said, I do recall that when there were stories all over the press a couple weeks ago, right before the South Carolina primary, that they didn't say PAC endorses Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders. Many of the headlines, and I'm sure you saw them too, actually said Congressional Black Caucus endorses Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders, which wasn't the case. This is a PAC. How does it happen that a political action committee gets to use the name of an organization within Congress, in this case, the Black Caucus?
It's incredibly problematic. When that announcement was made, you saw, an array of Black members of Congress standing behind a podium to make that announcement. Nowhere in sight were the corporate lobbyists on their board. Nowhere in sight were the corporate lobbyists that have donated. In fact, the people who actually made the decision to endorse Senator Clinton for president were nowhere to be seen in the pictures. And so press naturally saw up members of the Congressional Black Caucus, saying that we endorse this, but nowhere in sight were the people who actually made that announcement, who are pulling the strings. For us at Color of Change, we haven't made any endorsement in this presidential race or in the Senate race. We actually have a political action committee and could make an endorsement if we wanted to. But we've actually watched the presidential race, and we feel that both candidates need to do more for us. And we've watched as each of them have gotten better on our issues and have spoken better. But to the extent that when Black folks are seeing these type of endorsements and seeing these type of seals of approval, they've got to know where it's actually coming from. And this is a larger problem with money in politics in our country, where money is hidden, who's behind the money is hidden, and the American people and all of us suffer. This is also a question around civil rights, what we call civil rights washing. Much like greenwashing, where corporations, give money and make it seem like they're good on the environment when they're actually lobbying against problematic policies. With civil rights washing, this is where corporations cozy up to civil rights institutions and maybe give a little bit of money, while all the time advancing and promoting policies, predatory lending, privatized prisons, tobacco, all these things that put our communities in harm's way, but then claim these connections to our institutions because they've given a lot of money. This has to stop. For us at Color of Change, we continue to get recommended by people, so-called friends inside of DC, who said, this is how business is done. You all should figure out another way to push on this. You're going to lose friends if you stand up. But we recognize that business as usual never has and never will serve Black people in this country. It never has and never will serve oppressed people. So we're taking a leap of faith here, and we hope that people will go online to colorofchange.org and sign our petition. We hope that they will join us in this effort, because if we don't start speaking truth to power, if we don't start standing up and pushing back against the influences of those in power and hold those that are our friends accountable as much as those on the other side accountable, then we will never make the type of progress that our communities deserve.
We're talking with Rashad Robinson, who is Executive Director of Color of Change. And Rashad, I'm really glad that you brought up the issue of money in politics, and money both in the narrow sense of electoral politics, but also in the sense of, as you put it, civil rights washing. I think it's important for people to understand the nature of the transactions that we're dealing with here. And by that, what I mean is, so you have a corporation, let's say, that gives money, or some other financial interest that gives money to the CBC PAC in this case. What do they want in return for that? What are they getting, and what do certain elected members of the CBC get in return?
They want access. They want connection. They want to be able to influence legislation. We saw this show up for us as an organization very acutely during our efforts to protect a free and open internet, where AT&T and Comcast had deep relationships with the Congressional Black Caucus PAC and many civil rights organizations, legacy civil rights organizations that I grew up in. They created these relationships. They gave a lot of money. They put people on the boards of directors of those organizations. And then we watched as these institutions came out against a free and open internet. We watched as Black members of Congress went on the floor and fought against a free and open internet, all while brave young people on the streets of Ferguson and other communities around the country were using an open internet to tell their stories, to bypass corporate media that wasn't telling their stories, and to speak directly to the public about what was happening around police brutality in their communities and force a nation to pay attention. An organization like Color of Change, which was founded 10 years ago in the aftermath of a flood that was caused by bad decision makers that turned into an epic disaster, Hurricane Katrina. Black people were literally on their roofs begging for help, and Color of Change was able to form with a single email to 1,000 people, and we've turned into a community of 1.3 million people because of an open internet. We watched as civil rights organizations said that Black folks don't need an open internet, all while taking money from big telecom companies, all while cozying up and having dinners and parties with big telecom companies. And so this is part of the problem in Washington, is that folks can do these things if they think no one is watching, if no one is willing to push back, if business as usual means that we turn a blind eye, if we think that these aren't important issues. And so we as an organization have really stepped out and said that absolutely there are a whole host of policies that we've got to pass to make the lives of Black people better in this country. But actually, we won't be able to pass those policies if we don't deal with the structural barriers that allow our voices to be heard. We will never have as much money as the big corporations that want to put us in harm's way. And if those corporations are able to have access to the people that we put into office and are able to give them money and allow and have the type of access that prevents us from being able to be heard, then that's a problem.
Yeah, I think this is so important. And for our listeners who don't know, Rashad Robinson, your organization, Color of Change, was really on the forefront of the fight to keep an open internet, which means an internet that everyone can afford, that everyone has access to, that is, as you point out, an instrument, or can be in the right hands, and often is an instrument for social change. I think also in terms of CBC PAC, I think there's been some Wall Street involvement. You know more about it than I do, but I think that the issue of the abuses that Wall Street has inflicted on African American communities and other communities of color in this country is so deep. The wounds that have been inflicted are deep and they're persistent, and I think there's been some interconnection there as well, right?
Well, yeah, and it's interesting given the fact that in the race in Maryland, and we haven't made an endorsement there, but in the race in Maryland, just on its face, you have an African American progressive woman who's not taking Wall Street money, running 2 points ahead in a race of a moderate white Democrat in the primary. Regardless of who folks might agree with or not, you have someone who's a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, a Black woman, and the caucus decides not to endorse her, but in the same breath endorses Hillary Clinton for president. It's confusing, it doesn't make sense, and it speaks to the ways in which the PAC has to get its act together. Because at the end of the day, the PAC, the Congressional Black Caucus, claims and labels itself as the conscience of the Congress, as the Congress's conscience. And because they have so many members that have such a storied and legacy history in this country of fighting for civil rights, but you can't call yourself the conscience of the Congress and not actually be the conscience. I was on a show earlier today where folks were pushing back around this, and I said, you can't call yourself the vegan congressman and people catch you eating, barbecued ribs. You actually have to be who you say you are. And that is part of what we're pushing around this campaign. And that's why we've gotten so much positive feedback as well. As much as we've gotten pushback from the Washington insiders, I've been also very proud of the people outside of Washington that want Washington to do better, that want their congressional members to speak truth to power and speak with an unfiltered voice for their issues, and want them to say no to privatized prisons, just like Black members of Congress fought and led a lot of the efforts against corporations that were involved with apartheid South Africa. We want that same type of leadership today around the issues that are facing our community.
I think it's a brave and important campaign you guys are running at colorofchange.org. And since you mentioned it, I am curious, what kind of pushback have you gotten from has it been as intense as one could maybe imagine it might be from, let's say, more establishment politicians?
Well, I mean, there's the piece of the pushback that tries to make it seem like we're naive and we don't know how business works, and that this is how things get done, and we're not naive. We actually understand that this is how business is done, but how business is done hasn't helped our community. How business is done has actually put our communities in harm's way. And so we're trying to blow up how business is done. We've also got the pushback from folks that say, the Black community has so many things to deal with. Why are we infighting? Why are you fighting against other Black members when you all should be working together? And I absolutely do want to work together with folks. I absolutely do want to build the type of coalitions that move the issues forward that we want to move forward. But we have to move them forward with the type of ethics and resolve that allows us to actually win what we want to win. And so we can't just come together for the sake of coming together without any sort of undergirding values that hold us together. And then we have gotten some folks that are quite annoyed and frustrated that we've taken this fight on, and will fight back and push back and do all the things that folks in Washington do when get in between access to their capital, their money, and their political power. And so we're very used to, whether it's been our campaign around the American Legislative Exchange Council and calling out corporations involved in ALEC, or whether it was net neutrality, we are accustomed to that type of pushback. And we recognize that there will be some rooms and meetings that we were invited into before that we won't be invited to anymore. There will be some people who probably donate to Color of Change right now who will maybe stop their checks, where we're going to see if that happens. But at the end of the day, we exist to amplify and empower the voice of Black folks, to hold institutions and government accountable. And if our voice is drowned out by tobacco companies, by privatized prisons, if it's drowned out by the companies, the predatory student loan companies, if it's drowned out by the National Restaurant Association who's fighting a minimum wage, then our voice isn't powerful. And so
Right.
we've got to hold those in power accountable.
Well, you're always going to be welcome in this room, Rashad Robinson, Executive Director of Color of Change. We'll always encourage people to contribute, maybe to make up for those who have who might turn their backs on you because of this. Colorofchange.org. The petition is Tell the CBC Corporations Don't Speak for Black People. Rashad Robinson, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me. It was great.